Early yesterday, the White House trailed there was to be a surprise announcement at 6 p.m, and almost immediately the internet went into a frenzy of speculation over what could possibly require such a high-profile trail. Trump had been excoriating NATO the previous day, and NATO chief Mark Rutte had spent Thursday afternoon giving the US president a public brown-nosing. Could Trump be making a major announcement on the alliance? Or was it an update over the fragile ceasefire with Iran and the status of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz? Or potentially even a call for Israel to relent from their campaign of destruction in Lebanon? Well, what actually happened was, let's call it, unusual. Here's what viewers tuned into after the White House live feed began.
Good afternoon. The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell. My email reply to Maxwell cannot be categorized as anything more than casual correspondence. My polite reply to her email doesn't amount to anything more than a trivial note. I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump. I met my husband by chance at a New York City party in 1998. This initial encounter with my husband is documented in detail in my book, Melania.
This was all very out of the blue. The world was watching with bated breath over potentially another one of Trump's statements that have the potential to upend geopolitics. And instead, we were greeted with what seemed to be an attempt from Melania Trump to potentially get ahead of some kind of story potentially dropping about her proximity to convicted trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. What kind of allegations was she looking to get ahead of, though? Well, this is what she said.
Numerous fake images and statements about Epstein and me have been circulating on social media for years now. Be cautious about what you believe. These images and stories are completely false. I'm not a witness or a named witness in connection with any of Epstein's crimes. My name has never appeared in court documents, depositions, victim statements, or FBI interviews surrounding the Epstein matter. I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims. I was never involved in any capacity. I was not a participant, was never on Epstein's plane, and never visited his private island. I have never been legally accused or convinced of a crime in connection with Epstein's sex trafficking, abuse of minors, and other repulsive behavior. The false smears about me from mean-spirited and politically motivated individuals and entities looking to cause damage to my good name, to gain financially and climb politically, must stop. My attorneys and I have fought these unfounded and baseless lies with success and will continue to maintain my sound reputation without hesitation. To date, several individuals and companies have been legally obligated to publicly apologize and retract their lies about me, such as Daily Beast, James Carville, and HarperCollins, UK.
Now, what we do know is that she did as she said, send a single email to Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's imprisoned accomplice, in 2002. A redacted email to Maxwell from the Epstein files, signed off with "Love Melania," discusses a story from New York Magazine, and as she says, some trivial mentions of visits to New York and Palm Beach. As for the supposed fake photos and statements about her and Epstein that she says have been circulating social media, one can only speculate about what she's referring to. Many AI-generated photos of the two will undoubtedly have been shared by pernicious online actors. The claim that does require some scrutiny, however, is of when Melania and the president first met each other, of which there are some competing accounts. Melania's book states the two met at a party in 1998, which is contradicted by a couple of pieces of evidence. An email to Jeffrey Epstein from the sender redacted from shortly after the 2016 election claimed to have been on Donald Trump's plane the first weekend he met Melania, flying back after the sender was visiting Epstein in Florida. There's also this paragraph from the book entitled by Andrew Lowney that claims Epstein told an author he'd slept with Melania in the back of a limo a year before Donald Trump got together with her on his private plane. Melania's statement last night, however, by reigniting discussions of the Epstein files after they had been duly sidelined by events in the Middle East, have stirred her allies into coming to her defense. Paolo Zampoli, a modeling magnate close to the Trump family, has often been credited as being the one to introduce the two. He called UK journalist Mark Stone last night while they were recording Sky News' Trump 100 podcast.
Obviously very keen on a one-woman mission to distance herself.
Hang on. No, he's trying to call me now. Okay, I'm live on the podcast. Hi, Paolo. How are you? I'm actually in the middle of recording our podcast.
Let's do it. Come on.
Tell me, first of all, what your reaction was when you saw the First Lady's statement.
The First Lady stands out for the people. And of course, she has nothing to do with this, whatever criminal like this. I'm ready to testify in front of Congress if I'm asked and say the truth, because this is totally nonsense.
So you're willing to testify in front of Congress to prove that you were the person that introduced Melania to Donald Trump?
As an American citizen, I'm here to say the truth without any problem.
Fascinating. Paolo, thank you very much. Paolo Zampoli. We'll speak soon. Oh, he's gone. There you go. That was a surprise. Fascinating. He has confirmed to us that he's willing to testify before Congress to prove that he was the person. He couldn't quite tell us how he would prove it, but to prove that he's the person that introduced Melania and Donald.
Now, whilst we're on the subject of testifying to Congress, Melania is not just asking for testimony from those who would absolve her, but put out this plea to Congress regarding Epstein's victims.
Now is the time for Congress to act. Epstein was not alone. Several prominent male executives resigned from their powerful positions after this matter became widely politicized. Of course, this doesn't amount to guilt, but we still must work openly and transparently to uncover the truth. I call on Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony. Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes, and then her testimony should be permanently entered into the congressional record. Then, and only then, we will have the truth. Thank you.
Now, it does seem confusing to me, right? So you could see this on one end as somebody who's been impacted by something wanting to shift the narrative back over to the people who matter, which is the victims. But you could also see this as somebody going, well, I need to make sure that my name is completely cleared. So I want all of these people who've been affected by all of this to come up and give their testimony once more to ensure that I personally am absolved by all of this. And also it doesn't make sense to me is the fact that we don't want to bring up the Epstein stuff all over again if we're in the Trump administration, right? Clearly, making this into a big deal increases the scrutiny upon both Melania herself, as she pointed out there, but also upon her husband too. Like, this is all very bizarre. And what's complicated an already bizarre moment in an increasingly car crash nature of Trump's second term is that, according to reports, Donald Trump apparently had no idea that his wife was about to publicly resurrect the story that had plagued her first year in office, just as the world's attention was elsewhere. This is from CNN. A person familiar with the matter told CNN that the president was aware that his wife planned to speak, but the president told MS Now shortly afterward that he did not know anything about it. Stephen, this seems completely impossible to untangle to me. I do not know what is going on here because, again, everyone was talking about the Middle East. Everyone was talking about Iran. Everyone was talking about Trump's genocidal comments, right? The Epstein files, which had been plaguing the administration for months and months and months, they hadn't gone away, but they were in the back of people's minds. And now it's gone right up to the top of the headlines again. And Trump himself, I can't imagine a world in which he wouldn't know that the White House was planning to do a statement. It was going to be broadcast from there, all of their official channels involving his wife, and go, no idea, none of my business. What's going on? Genuinely, what's going on?
It's very hard to exaggerate how insane this is, because yesterday we were told that the president was going to make some announcement at 6 p.m. US time. And we were sort of trying to anticipate what that was going to be, and we assumed it was going to be something to do with Iran. 6 p.m. Eastern time comes around last night, like 11 o'clock here, and out comes Melania Trump, drawing attention to lies about her that literally nobody was thinking about. And I was like, I watched it and I was like, what lies? What juicy lies about Epstein is she referring to? So of course I immediately started Googling, found out, again, it's not really that much. It's, as far as I can tell, it's like one obviously fake photograph, this claim in the Lowney book, which is, a third-hand claim, and maybe some, online chatter.
This amounts to like scurrilous celebrity gossip rather than the real dangerous claims that people are making about other people, as she mentions, in powerful positions.
Right, of course, exactly, and it just sort of. So then she comes out and she sort of draws everybody's attention to these lies, which then everybody goes and looks up and then can make a judgment for themselves about how plausible they do or don't find them. And my immediate thing was, there was going to be something Trump was going to say about Iran. That's now being cancelled because they've decided like it's unwise on the eve of negotiations or whatever for him to come out and make this kind of statement. And so in order to distract from that, they've put Melania out there to talk about Epstein. But then I was like, but wasn't Iran a distraction from Epstein? So you guys have these two. Are we just now forever in this kind of cycle where one of these horrific abuse scandals is going to be, this one horrific abuse scandal is going to be used to distract from this crazy war scandal, which itself will then be used to distract from this horrific abuse cycle? Is this going to be the rest of the presidential term, where it's like one or the other, drawing us from one thing that wants to be avoided to another thing that wants to be avoided and back again? Maybe that's a level of like political strategy. Maybe it is just the idea that actually, if you just keep everybody busy talking about Melania Trump's very weird announcement, then they're not going to be talking about the thing that you really don't want them to be talking about.
It's very Putin-esque to me, because I know internally in Russian politics, it's been deliberate strategy from the Putin administration to keep things as entropic as possible, to keep the news stories being kind of scurrilous, to ensure that no one really knows where the power lies, so the people who are tired of the entropy want strong leadership, which is what Putin is pushing himself to be, right? The problem with that strategy, that doesn't work when it's your leadership that's coming into question from all of these scurrilous rumors.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why would you involve like the scurrilous rumors around your own wife? That's what you were trying to do. That just draws the focus, right?
We were discussing this story before we went live, and I was like, did they have like an actual announcement about NATO that they planned for 6 p.m? Then Mark Rutte went, Daddy Trump, please forgive me. You've made the world so safe. And then he's gone, okay, well, we'll cancel that, but we've got this announcement. So I should throw Melania into the ring, see what she says.
Yeah, that's what we thought yesterday, right? Because it was the announcement came out. I think the announcement of the announcement came out just after he'd met with Rutte, and Rutte was like making these statements about the importance of NATO. And I thought, oh, it's going to be a US withdrawal from NATO. That's what I'm expecting. Yeah. Maybe that was the case. Maybe for some reason they as you say, maybe Rutte talked him round. Maybe actually there was the idea that actually probably now is not the time to do that on the eve of these negotiations with Iran, and to sort of alienate your allies who are probably going to need to help with the Strait and whatever. I don't know. It's really impossible to understand. The other thing is I'd be like, it's also surprising the way that Melania drew the attention back to the victims of Epstein and sort of made that plea for them to give their evidence in Congress and for that to enter the congressional record. Because at the same time, you have Nancy Mace just yesterday at the same time, yesterday at some point, talking about how she had seen the client list, which is still being withheld, according to her, by the Department of Justice, and that it had to come out. So if you have this idea that, I mean, who knows what's real? But if you have this idea that the Department of Justice is somehow withholding extremely incendiary information from the Epstein files, allegedly with the input of Trump, and then on the other hand, you have his wife saying, let's blow it all open in Congress, in congressional hearings, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I have no idea. It could be, as you say, it could be a Putin-style media strategy of, permanent chaos.
Flooding the zone,
exactly. But it seems to be too much drawing attention to the thing that you don't want to draw attention to.
And you'd want to flood the zone when the Iran war was still going on.
Right.
Not just during the ceasefire negotiations. Like, you just move things closer to a position where, petrol prices might go down and geopolitical stability might be coming back. And instead we've gone straight to, as soon as all that stuff continues to calm down, we have a fragile ceasefire, let's talk Epstein. It doesn't make any sense to me.